Right, so I thought I'd start this career build series here. I did the Stormworks Basics videos there where we went over how to build a motor. So I'm going to use that motor and that microcontroller, and we'll start a career world, and we'll go through how to set up the career world, and then we'll start actually, um, you know, going in that career world and trying to make profit, make essentially a living at doing it, and kind of show the efficacy of that. So I'm gonna just let it pick a random world seed. I want career mode, starter base. I'm gonna shut off weapons DLC. I'm gonna go to the add-ons. AI pass, aircraft, default AI I want. Arctic zones I want. Building missions, fine. Cargo containers, delivery zones, dock bollards, elevators, forest fire missions are good. Let's see, what else do I want? I don't want natural disasters. I'm not a fan. Default resource trading will keep. Mission zones. Default tutorial we want off. DLC weapons AI we want off. Let's click. So that's off. That's off. Story mission zone. Enable sirens. Let me go max. This should be off anyways, but I want to try to make sure they still seem to come on every once in a while. So see if I have any other options here. Default mission locations. Natural disaster missions I'm going to shut off. Make sure I don't have any other options here. I think the AI account's fine. It's not going to be a multiplayer. I'm not going to do Stormlink or anything on this. Alright, so let's start that. Alright, so one of the things we're going to focus here on is we're going to start by essentially turning that Stormworks basic motor into a small little boat. As I go through this this Stormworks Basics career build series, I'll put the links to what I make up in the workshop, so if you want to follow along, if you want to use my builds, you can. This is intended to kind of help explain the game out to newer players, try to go through the actual logic, make it a little less daunting. All right, so we don't have a mission. I don't believe anywhere. We do not. All right, so let's start by there we go. So we just had one pop up. So we need to build a boat to get that. So it's gone missing. So let's start by building a little rescue boat. So let's actually start by, let's grab my Stormworks Basics engine tutorial. This is the one that's on the workshop. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move it there for now, and I'm going to build a small rescue boat. So I'm going to put on my symmetry. One thing you'll notice is you want to have this free cam mode. I believe it starts in does it start in orbit mode? I think it starts in orbit mode. So here you orbit around the build, which is very difficult to, I think, operate. So make sure that when you're trying to build, free cam mode allows you to fly around your build, which makes it much, much easier. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is, when you're building, you want to make sure it's the red part. So I'm just going to, I'm going to drag a line to start our boat here. I'll drag it here and I'll move it up, just so that I can build. So I'm going to build in this back area here. All right, and then I'm going to incorporate these parts. I'll just drop this whole engine in. That way, we can say that we use the Stormworks Basics engine in there, unchanged really. All right, so I'll share my hull design philosophy. A lot of people, it seems, struggle with building hulls. So I'm just going to move it up so I have some space here. So the first thing I like to do is build the decking. So what I like to do is I like to look at real boats and kind of see what their dimensions are. As much as people will give Stormworks a bunch of grief for for its physics, you can build things to the dimensions of a lot of real life craft and they actually function pretty well. If you start kind of going outside of that, that's when you start getting into issues where the boat's a little too tippy, something like that. So let's try to make this, we want this rescue boat to last us a little while, so we'll make it at least 30 feet long. So like I just did a quick search on Google, rescue boat 30 feet. First one that pops up, 30-foot surf rescue boat, Wikipedia. Says the boat is 30 feet 4 inches in length with a beam, which is the width of 9 feet 4 inches. So let's try to aim for about a 3-to-1 length to beam. So what I'm going to start doing here is building the deck. So this is going to be the main deck. So I'm going to take a 1x2 wedge here, and I don't want this to be too sharp of a bow. So I'm going to start with those are 1x2 wedges here. Then I'm going to go into put a 1x1 wedge here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set my length, which I'll do by going like this. So I want about a little bit longer than 10 meters here. I can add more to the back as I need, because I can move it forwards here. But so that there is what was that? That was 9.5 meters. So so that's about the right size. So 3-to-1. So let's make this a 9-meter long boat. So right there, that is, if you look at the bottom, that's where I'm seeing 36 blocks, 9 meters. All right, so that's a 9-meter long boat. So that's where we want it. So I'm going to take the center here and I'll drag it along, and I can delete this upper part here. So there's our length. All right, so now let's do our width. Let's make our width, so we'll make it a little bit over 3 meters wide. So right there, that's 3.75 meters wide. Let me look at that. That looks pretty good. It's always a reasonable idea in Stormworks to add a little bit of extra width. It makes dealing with the stability a little bit easier. So we'll continue off with our 1x1s here, and then when I get here to the where I made the deck in here, I'll go to let's do a 1x4 wedge. So there's my 1x4 wedge. All right, so now we have a deck. So I'm going to delete where it, auto-filled those in there, and then I'll fill this. So this is how I like to start my hulls. All right, so as you can see here, now I just did this long arm here just to make sure we're all the same same color here. So let's look at this hull, and we can decide if we want to change it. So it's a little bit bulbous, but it's not, it's not bad. It's a little bit on the broad side, but the thing with this is if you put a really sharp bow in here, you're going to start to have to do a bunch of extra tricks and have to go through a bunch of extra stuff to get the buoyancy right. When you have Stormworks works with enclosed volume for buoyancy, so if you had a really thin, sharp bow, you're going to need a lot more buoyancy to make that work. All right, so here is the main deck. This is going to be the first deck. This is where we want to walk on. All right, so from there, I'm actually going to go up. So the character is 7 blocks tall. So this is how tall the character is. What's that? That's 7? That is 8. So the character is this tall. All right. So I like to make my rails on my larger ships about 3 tall. All right, and then if I'm going to make a small boat like this, I'll do about 2 tall. So that's going to be the rail of the ship. So I'm going to drag that back here. Now I do what I call a sculpt in method. So I make my stuff very boxy to get the shape established, and then I go in and I I start to smooth. You know, some people go right with a smoothing phase. I tend to make them pretty boxy, and then I'll go in and cut in what I want to cut in. So from here, I'm going to actually go up. All right, so I want to meet that rail. So I'm going to go up about, and I'm actually going to go up 3. I want the bow to be 1 taller than the side rails, and I'll show you that in a minute. You'll see that on a lot of boats. All right, so I just deleted those. So that's my deck done. And I'm going to start to get this ready. So I'm going to take a 1x1 here. And I'm actually going to go, so we want that 2x2 next one. So I'm going to take pyramid. And once I'm done with this hull, before I start putting parts in it, you know, I may or may not just post that to the workshop. My phone's going to go off the whole time I do this, of course. All right. So let's go right here, and as you can see, I'm going to start building in the area that we just deleted out. All right. All right. And so then the last one here. All right, so let's go in here. And so one nice thing is, instead of searching for the piece, just take a regular block, do Control left click, and it copies that block. And now you can more quickly get those. And then so actually I'll show you how to do this a little simpler. So if you go so let's take that block and we'll copy it. We'll go to the top here. Because we're switching to 1x1s after that, we can go like this. And then we'll build the top of the hull here. All right, so now I need to decide what I'm doing here. I think, yeah, we'll try. I was trying to decide if I wanted to go to a. I'm trying to decide if I want to go to a 1x4 or not. I think I do. So let me go pyramid, and then we should have a 1x4 pyramid here, and we'll put that here. All right. So now we can fill that in there. All right, so we're starting to get the top of the boat. So this is where we'd walk around. This is going to be the main deck. It's just going to be a single deck boat. And you know, we're starting to have the rail here. So we want this front rail a little bit higher to break the waves. We can do a wedge here. And so I'm going to get the top of the boat kind of looking the way I want it. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Let's decide how I want to fill this in. So you can do a couple things. If you want to start like this is an option to go like, remember these are going to be 2s there, 1x2s. So we'll go like this. We can do this, which is actually probably my preference. Or we could completely box the front, and then that will also give us a buoyant volume. Now, if we can leave an air gap in here, which I'm going to, that's going to be more buoyancy. So we can do it like that if we wanted. Or we can go ahead and we can put in, let me see. So I'm going to do 1x2 inverse pyramids here. Let's put it up here. I'm going to hit the invert key. There we go. So we can go like that. It's an option as well. I think I like this better. And then I want to do 1x2 pyramid here. Yep, so I like that. That looks good. And let's do, so if I drag that up, it's going to fill the interior space too. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to singularly place these. That will leave me air gaps, so I can either put things in there that I need, but it's also going to give me air gaps that help give me some buoyancy. All right. So that looks like a pretty good boat hull to start with. So that's the upper hull. That's where the deck's going to be. Underneath here is we're going to start to work on building below the water line. So the water line should be for us right about here. That's going to be our water line. All right, we want the water line into the deck because in Stormworks, you know, in real life, if you have water coming up here, it wouldn't be in the boat. But in Stormworks, if the water line comes above your decking it's going to be in the boat. So let's continue down. We'll do that by starting here with the with our 1x1 wedge. I'm just going to drag it down, and we'll just look at, and we'll do maybe right about there. All right, and I'm just going to delete this fill in here. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is we'll start by copying our 1x2, and we'll drag it all the way down. All right, then we'll copy our 1x1 pyramid. We'll drag that down, and we'll continue building the hull. Yep. And we'll drag it down. Drag that down. And then so right here, I'm going to have to start to change it because I did a 1x4. So I need a 1x1 pyramid. I'm sorry, 1x4 pyramid. All right, and now I'm going to drag. Oh, it's not grabbing. Okay. Let's make sure it clicks. There we go. And we'll go down to there. All right. So that's starting to give us our hull shape. Now I want to take this this 1x4 inverse, and I'm actually going to drag it backwards like this. All right. Now I might not go as deep as I've gone on this. I'm just kind of looking at it and seeing where I want to go with it. All right, so let's make that where the bottom of the boat terminates there. I'll kind of just add it to the stern here just to get going. Like I said, I do a sculpt in where I build something, then I'll start cutting into it like a sculpture. All right, so let's see what I want to do here. So here we have our, let me see what parts. I might have to change this a little bit because of we don't have the part to finish it, but I will look. Okay, there we go. So I went to a 2x4. Now, so a lot of people struggle with this. It's really not all that difficult. If you look at the intersection, right, we have 2 going this way, and we have 4 going this way. So that's how I knew you needed a 2x4. Is, you know, people often struggle with that. Just count out what the sides are, and that will get you to where you need to be. I know it sounds a little simple, but you often have people struggling to get those angles completed. All right, and we'll start to fill this in here. That is reversed. There we go. And we'll continue to just keep finishing this up here. All right, so now we have the hull of our boat built here. All right, so that's looking pretty good so far. All right, so let's go, and we'll fill that in. I'm going to go ahead and I'll fill all this in again. You know, we'll cut into it if we need to. You know, I want to do a float test here. So often what you'll see on boats is you're going to have a transom in the back. You're going to have an area sticking over. That is going to be where your props are. This is going to be an inboard. I'm not doing an outboard for this. All right, so I'm going to start with just the square boat. Well, actually, we might make this a little bit longer. So let's do this. Let's take our Stormworks Basics motor here, and we're going to copy it all, and we'll do a float test. So this is one of the things I like to do pretty early on with the build is get it floating. You'll start to see if you have any problems right off the bat. You don't want to spend a ton of time building this boat and then realize something's not going to work and you have to change it. So let's move the whole Stormworks Basics motor inside the boat, and we will paste it in there. And we'll go ahead and paste it. All right, now I'm going to go down here to this world view, and I'm going to use my move, and I'm going to put it in the water. I'm actually going to put it a little bit forwards here. And so where is our water line? If you remember, we want our water line to be where this deck is. So I'm going to set it so that the water line is right there so that the water is not showing in the deck. And let's spawn it in. All right, so as you can see, we float nicely. the stern is popped out more, which is fine. We're going to cut into that transom. We're going to make a transom, so we'll lose some buoyancy there. We can also use, it's always better to have more buoyancy than less because you can add weight blocks. All right, and plus we haven't added anything else. So as you can see, I can stand on this. I can stand on the very far rail. We don't have any tipping problems. This is very important in game to do. Is you know, if you make your boat too narrow, you're gonna have tipping problems. So we went a little bit wider than a real boat, and that gave us good buoyancy. All right, so I'm gonna shut world view back off. So I like this boat so far. It's a little bit short, so I'm actually gonna lengthen it a little bit. So what I'm just going to do here is I'm going to make it easy for myself. I'm just going to use my selection tool. Make sure I get all the way to the bottom here. Okay. I'm going to come over to this side. I'm just going, and I'll get rid of those. Just copy all of this. And we'll just paste it. And I'll keep making it bigger than the, that looks pretty good there. That fits. That's a little bit better lengthwise. And we'll merge it. And now I'm just going to cut out what I don't want in there from my copy. So that's a powerful tool, being able to copy like that. It makes it much easier to move stuff. All right, so now we have, this is going to be where our engine or engines will go. And you know, this is where our you know, so we're making good progress on this. So that's also where most of our, or all of our buoyancy comes from. All right, so now next thing we're going to do is we're going to start cutting into this. All right, so we want to put a transom in there. So yeah, let me get a definition on the boat transom. Let's make it a little bit more accurate. So the flat surface forming the stern of the boat or horizontal beam reinforcing the stern of a boat, a strengthened crossbar. So we're talking about the flat surface forming the stern of the boat is the transom. So this is our transom area back here we want to build. I need to delete another wall. That's just for my merging. All right, so now let's look at where the deck is. So let's establish a water line. So this is something I like to do early too. So right here is our water line, as you can see. So or that's our deck right here. So we want our water line below the deck, and then so hopefully the water will be about there. So let's what I'm going to do is I'm going to use paint, and I'm just going to make a black line here, and that will be my water line. I'm going to start by painting this water line. This tells me where I want the water to be. So as I start to work on balancing and ballasting and where I want that water to be, I don't want that glitchy business with the game where the water shows over the deck. I want to know where my water line is going to be. So that's my water line. All right. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut in my transom. So we know right here, this pink line here, that's where our deck is. So we can start to cut in under the water line for a transom. So I'm going to make it, we'll make it pretty simple here to start with. I'll just completely cut out all of this. All right. We could use the selection tool if we wanted, but with the symmetry on, this will be pretty quick. All right, so there's my transom. All right, and so I'm actually going to build it up just a little bit more with some block like that. And I'm going to, you know, if this was a ship, I'd probably have a large ship would probably have a much more sloping transom, but with a little boat like this, you really don't have to worry about that. All right, so now I'm going to just do 1x1 blocks or 1x1 wedges here. All right, we'll go across. All right, now I'm going across instead of up because that would autofill the other side if I did that. So now, as you can see, we have a little bit of a transom here. So our prop's going to stick out here. We're going to have a rudder here, or rudders. We'll probably end up with 2 motors. You know, so now again, let me do a little bit more detailing while I'm here. Let's smooth these edges a little bit. So let's put in a pyramid like that. Let's put in a 1x1 wedge. All right. So I often, I'll go back and forth from detailing and from just cutting in basic designs, depending on what I feel like. If I'm getting bored just, building technical stuff, I'll start working on detailing. I'll go back and forth. All right. Let's cut those out, and then we can take a 1x1 pyramid and drag that down, and that should fill it in for us. And so as you can see, that smoothed this out, made our hull look nice and smooth. Let's go back and we'll paint our black line here for our water line. All right, so now let's do a buoyancy test again. So that should be in the water. Let's float it. Now remember, our stern was floating a little bit higher than we wanted last time. As you can see, it's gone down a little bit. We cut into that transom, so we lost some buoyancy. So this boat's looking really nice. The hull is in good shape. As you can see, we want that black line down in the water. We still have a little bit of high of a stern. That's perfectly fine. Again, it's great to have more buoyancy than we need. Our motor is going to go in here. We'll probably do 2 motors. Our motors are going to be right here. And we're going to put some rudders on here. And so that's going to add some weight. We can also always add weight blocks if we need to. If you have too little buoyancy, if we had a foam block, that would be great. We could add some buoyancy with foam, but we don't. So it's always better to have more buoyancy. You can add some weight blocks to, put a little weight in there. That also makes it so that the boat is less likely to be bothered by wind. All right, so just some mechanics of how Stormworks career mode works here. If you saw, like when I pick up a block, it tells me it's $5 each. It tells me my money on the right here is $14,424. It tells me what my boat currently costs. This costs $5,000. So we're not having to spend any money until we actually launch the boat. So keep that in mind. All right, so let me smooth out this here. I'm kind of in a smoothing phase at the moment right now. So let's smooth this. So let's take that. I like to build in white to start with. All right, so there we go. So that smooths the hull even more. That's nice. All right, so we're in good shape here. So the Stormworks basic motor I built here, I'm trying to decide if I actually want to use it. I think I'm going to build some custom motors. That's usually what I do. But what we can use is we can use the same microcontroller. One nice thing with the way these modulars work is, so currently, this is a 1-cylinder engine. If I added another cylinder on there, if I added 10 cylinders on there, I could add them all in the back here, and it would this microcontroller would still work fine. All right, so let's start by let's put in some rudders. So I'll show you the rudders I like for this. So I'm going to use these, and so I'm going to put them right about, maybe a little bit more inboard, right there. All right, so those are my 2 rudders right there. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my selection grid. I'm going to clear what was in there first. I'm going to select this rudder and this one with the shift key. I'm going to cut them. And I'm going to push them up into the hull. You'll see it's going to delete the blocks where it's going to go. Paste it. Clear content. We'll merge it. All right. So next thing I'm going to do is, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I want to make sure the rudders turn in the correct direction. So I'm going to go Logic. I'm going to go to the seat. And I want A and D. And I'm going to connect it to the rudders. Now, because we're in career mode, I need to put a battery in here. I'm going to need electricity. So we'll go ahead and we'll connect up the electricity here. So Logic, electricity. I'm going to connect these 2 here, and that's all I need. I'm just controlling the rudders right now. So let's spawn it in. All right, so that's in there. Let me see. I might have issues with, I can't go third person. So, yeah, I can't go third person. So let's do something different here. Trying to think what I can do here. We can fix that later. We'll deal with that later. We'll actually just get the boat steering. We'll see what they're doing. You know, if you were in, so often like I'll even take a build like this. So let's do this. Let's do this how I would do it if I was really doing it. So let's go, we'll add this, we'll do Stormworks Basics. Let me see, what do I want to call this? Career boat. All right. Stormworks Basics career boat. Then one thing I like to do is I like to make another copy, and I just call it backup. If you notice, like you come down to some of my things here, I have many copies of it. Like you see all the copies of this boat, all the copies. That's great for if you ever lose something or you accidentally delete something and or like a microcontroller, you can easily go back and pull out that microcontroller again. All right, so that's saved. So let's so that's saved up. So now let's exit that, and I'm gonna save my career game. So this is Stormworks Basics career. All right, and we will we'll click the menu. And we're gonna boot up my test server. All right, so I would recommend, this is gonna cut down your frustration if you're building in a career mode. It's good to have a custom game where you have infinite money, where you have third-person view, where you have the ability to fly. That way you can test your builds and see if they're going to work. You know, without some of the constraints of career. So I'm just going to move that closer here so that I can easily jump on. So like I wouldn't need the battery in this mode. For example, I could turn on infinite electricity. All right, so let me jump in the seat. I'm going to go into third person view. Now I'm going to go hard right. All right, so if we look at our port rudder is moving in the correct direction to go right. Our starboard rudder is moving in the wrong direction to go right. All right. So let's go under here, and so what we want to do is we want to select our rudder, our right rudder, the one that was moving the wrong direction. Now I did selection grid, control left click. I'm going to cut it. Now if we look at the arrow, there's U, I, and O are your inverse keys. So let's go through all of them. U did the function we want. If you notice, this solid arrow was on the port side. It was the wrong direction, so when I pressed the U key, it went on the starboard side, which is the correct direction. If I press I, it's going to go this way, upside down. We don't want that. And if I press O, it's going to turn around the other way, so we don't want that. So this is how we want it. So we want the arrows both on the same way, same direction. So I need to go into third person and actually move them to see if that was right. We'll go ahead and we'll paste it, we'll clear it, and we'll merge it. Now we know that should be right, but we'll go and we'll check it anyway. All right. So as you can see, now the rudders are moving the correct direction. I'm holding right, they're moving right. I'm holding left, they're moving the correct direction to turn us left. All right, so I'm actually going to continue to build this in career mode here. Let me save this. So I just alternate the saves when I do that. We'll continue to build in our custom mode here for our career. The only difference we'll do is I'll teleport over here to the beginner base. Like I said, this is one of the biggest tips I can give you for career mode is have yourself a custom game you can build stuff. It just makes the building much easier. All right, so like I'm going to delete out that that battery for now. I'm going to move the build back towards the center of the build area. All right, so now we have our rudders in. So let's put our props in. All right, now you'll see a lot of people, they build very, I don't want to criticize anyone's builds, but they build things that are not realistic, which is fine. You know, you can build whatever you like. But I tend to try to build things the way they would be IRL. And this saves you a lot of problems because, you know, if you're building things the way they are IRL, you're having real engineers, you know, make these decisions about how these things should be, and therefore, more often than not, they're going to work. And so it saves you a lot of trial and error by doing that. So let me make sure my symmetry mode's on. And so right here, we're going to use small props. So right here behind the, or in front of the rudders rather, midway through, we're going to cut in. And I'm going to type in prop. And I will put in a small prop. And as you can see, the props are not colliding with anything. That's pretty good. All right. Let's see if I want to go one more back. I may. All right, so I think, let me see, do I want to go one more back in? Trying to decide here. Let me, here's what I'll do. If I can decide what I'm going to do. All right, let's try it. I just want to see this aesthetically. So I'm going to select this with the selection grid. I'll cut it and I'll move it and see if I like it. So that's where we had it. That's another option. So I actually like the prop sticking out more, I think. I'm trying to decide which I like better. I think that's good. So I want it sticking out more. So I'm going to use a selection grid and I'll do that on this side as well. Yeah, I like that better, sticking out more. All right, we're going to merge it. And then I'll do a little bit of decorating here just because, why not? Do a 1x1 wedge. There we go. Make them look a little bit beefier there. And maybe I'll block the tops a little bit with a single block. See how that looks? Yep, I like the look of that. That looks good. All right, nice. So we have our props in there. All right, now let's start building our motors. So I've decided let's do twin motors. So this is for a number of reasons. Okay, so let's talk about kind of the basics of motors with Stormworks. So the higher your RPS, essentially the higher you're revving the engine, the more fuel you're going to burn, the more heat you're going to create. You know, then you have to start worrying about cooling. Cooling can start running into problems. The bigger the engine, the more cylinders it has, the higher the gear ratio you're going to be able to run, and the more fuel efficient you're going to be able to run it because of that gear ratio. There's a number of benefits to running a higher, to making your engine bigger. So often you want to go larger. So, you know, what I originally was going to throw this in, but this is one cylinder. This was just for testing purposes and to demonstrate it. So let's actually build a custom motor for this. So let's start with a gearbox. So you'll see a lot of people when they put out their things, they'll do some stuff that is unrealistic. Again, people should do whatever they want, but you know, I like to do things a little bit more realistic. So for example, a boat you don't shift gears in a boat. You know, the reason you're doing a car is the wheel has actual contact with the ground in a car. So you have a lot of friction. So you really need that mechanical advantage and the ability to change gears to keep the RPM down. So say, for example, a good example of this is with electric cars now, and even with electric racing cars, they have electric racing circuits where they have no gears. And some of them, I think, might have 3 gears, but most of them have no gears. And the reason is, for example, let's talk about my motorcycle. My motorcycle, it revs out to 6,500 RPM. That's red line. So if I was in first gear and doing 6,500 RPM, I might be doing 40. And the engine's screaming and burning a ton of fuel. I'm doing a lot of wear and tear on the engine. So as I go up to 5th gear, I might only be doing about, you know, 2,000 RPM to do 90. And so that's allowing me to reduce my RPM, which reduces my wear and tear, my fuel burn, my temperature, by doing all those things. In a boat, you really don't need that because the prop can slip in the water if it needs to. So we really, in this, I really only want 2 gears in a boat. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put these gears and I'm going to have the arrow pointing towards the engine. All right, so when the arrow is pointing towards the engine, this is multiplying the engine's effect to the prop. So if the arrow is pointing to the engine, we went over this in basics, for every 1 rotation of the engine, it's going to move how many we set in here. So for example, if I put a 3-to-1, for every 1 rotation of the engine, the prop is going to turn 3 times. That's what I want in a boat. It's going to be the opposite in a car. You're going to want the arrow pointing the other way, so for every 3 rotations of the engine, you're going to get 1 rotation of the prop. I'm sorry, of the wheel. So let's leave that at 1 to 1 for now. We'll work on our gear ratios later. All right. So this is actually what I'm going to do right now. So one of the first things I actually do with a boat, and again, this is one of the reasons why I say have yourself a test world, a custom mode, to be able to test stuff. So what I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to delete those out, and I'm going to do a trick I like to do where I put a motor in, an electric motor. So let's do a small electric motor for now. If we need to put a bigger one in, we will. So as you can see, very simple, props to motors. That's it. And the reason I do this is how I find out my top speed. Will help me figure out gearing. This will help me figure out a bunch of stuff. I can do a little bit of math. So I'm going to take my WS. I'm going to connect it to my 2 motors. AD is still connected to the props. I'm going to go into my seat. I'm going to go to WS. I'm going to make this sticky so that it holds what I put in there. I'm going to spawn it in. All right. Now another reason why I like to build these things in my custom world is I can control the weather. You know, if you're in your career mode, the weather might be really nasty, and you're just trying to do some tests, and you're getting beaten all around. So this makes it much easier. All right. So now with the electric motors, I'm just going to press W all the way up. I'm going to go full speed. I'm going to quickly do some turning tests. All right, and as you see, this boat's a little too slow for me with just 2 small motors. All right, so I'm going to recall it back in. I'm going to change those out for large motors. All right, or I'm sorry, let's change them out for mediums. All right, so we're not going to actually use these to drive. We're going to use modular engines to drive the boat, but I'll show you why I do this here in a second. And we're going to, this allows us to do some math to figure out how we want our boat to end up. A lot of people struggle in the game because they're doing a lot of guesswork. If you can do a little bit of pre-planning, that will save you a bunch of that guesswork. So next thing we want is a linear speed sensor right here, linear speed sensor. I can stick that anywhere. I'm just going to stick it right here. All right, next thing we do is a function block. Function, 1 input. I'll put that right there. I'm going to get a dial. All right, so dials are your friend in game. It allows you to very easily test things out to get your numbers, see what's working, see what's not working. It doesn't need to face a certain direction. I'm going to take the linear speed. I'm going to connect to the function block. I'm going to connect the function block to the dial. Now, I like to do everything in knots with boats. So I do x times 1.943844. Now, that is how you convert meters per second, which the game starts in, to knots. If you go down here to conversions, you'll notice right here, x times 1.943844. That just have that in memory. That tells you how to go from meters per second to knots, meters per second to mile per hour, kilometers, turns, and radians. That will give you some of your conversions. If you go online and look it up, you can do even more conversions. All right, so now it's going to take the x, the linear speed, it's going to multiply by that number, it's going to give us knots. All right, so let me make sure I have that connected. I do not yet, so let's go WS. We have to connect to these medium electric motors, and let's spawn it. All right, so the reason I'm doing this is I'll show you some of the math to quickly figure out what we need our RPS on our engine to be to give us the speeds we want in this boat. So I would say in a starter boat like this, 20. This is the other reason why it's good to do it in custom, is you can shut off damage if you want. Shut off megalodons. I don't want megalodons. All right, so now I'm going to go W. All right. So this boat is already really stable. You see a ton of people in the workshop that their boats do a backflip. I went full throttle. I didn't do a backflip. All right, so this is a well-designed boat. Part of the reason is this isn't I'm so great. I went online and I researched what engineers have spent decades doing, and I used their information. So I went on there. I found the appropriate length and width, and I actually made it a little bit longer. And as you see, because I used what other engineers had used for decades, I didn't have to do a lot of work. So use some real-world stuff, and it will make your building much easier. All right, so let's look at our dial. We are doing 30 knots. That's great. All right. So let's go back to the workbench. If you're too far away from the workbench, you have to go to Map, select the vehicle, and take to workbench. All right, so let's put another dial in there. All right, so 30 knots is awesome. That's great. That's going to give us good speed. So now we need to try to reproduce that with our modulars. So this is where I'm going to show you why I'm doing it this way. All right, so let's see. So let's go here. I'm going to erase that. Going to put in T-pipes. There we go. I don't need two of them, but I'm going to put two of them in. And then I want a torque meter here. And from this torque meter, all I want is the RPS function. And I'm going to hook that to this dial. So what this is going to tell me is how many RPS this is turning to get me 30 knots. Now, let's talk about the engineering of how a propeller works. So as you notice, these have a certain pitch to them. All right, the same with an airplane prop, a fixed pitch airplane prop. With airplane props, even some boat props, you can change the pitch angle. But for a set pitch, and this actually works with it, one of the reasons why they call boat prop screws is it works in the same principle as a screw. So think about you putting a piece of screw, you're putting a screw into a piece of wood. For every one rotation of the head of the screw, you're going to get a certain distance of travel into the wood. All right. So for every one rotation of this water prop, you're going to get a certain distance achieved forwards. So with that small bit of knowledge, if you know for one rotation I go X, forwards, you can determine how fast you're going by the RPS. Or how fast you want to go by the RPS. So let's make sure that's connected. Okay, good. Let's spawn. All right, so we don't need to go too far into that math to figure out what we're doing here, but this is going to help us with gear ratios. All right, so here I'm going to go full throttle again. All right. All right, so we're at full throttle. We're going about 30, 31 knots. All right, so let's write this number down. I'm going to put this in my notebook here. All right, so we're going about 19.7. So let's say we want 19.7 RPS at the prop to give us the speed we want. So we're looking for 19.7 RPS for 30 knots. Okay. All right, so let me take this back to the workbench. All right, now I'll just bring up the calculator really quick. All right, so pretty simple. 30 divided by 19.7 is, so for every one rotation, it's 1.5 miles an hour we're going to get. So if I had those props going 1 RPS, I'd be doing 1.5 knots. If I had them going, so that tells me, so if I was going 10 RPS, it's going to go 15 knots. All right. If I was doing 20 RPS, about 19.7, I'm going to go about 30. All right. So now we can think about gear ratios. So let's think of our gear ratios really quick. So there's no point in gearing up the electrics, but this is how we just can help determine what gear ratios we want. So let's talk about 3 to 1. So 3 to 1 with that one gearbox is going to be our highest ratio. So if I want to do, let's actually do a 2 to 1 just to make the math a little bit easier. So let's say that we were getting 20 RPS out of there. If I made a gearbox that was 2 to 1, I could actually, if I was able to turn the motor at 19 RPS, I could go 60 knots. It's actually better if I went the opposite direction and start to reduce the RPS on the engine. That's going to reduce heat, that's going to reduce fuel burn and make it easier to cool. So if I did a 2 to 1 gear ratio, I could do 10 RPS on the motor and I could still go that same speed. If I did a 3 to 1, I could even go to a lower RPS and get that same speed. All right, so let's jump back in our boat here. And let's start to put in our motors. So we have some information here. So we want 19 about, let's say, 20 RPS at the prop. All right, so let's try to build this boat as efficient as we can. So let's put a gearbox back on. I'm going to get the engines built, and then in the next video we can actually start hooking them up. I'll break from this video. Let's go 3 to 1. 3 to 1 is going to be our highest gear ratio. Now my understanding is that if you stack the gearboxes, you start getting loss per gearbox. So I also don't want to do that if I don't have to. And I'm going to make a -1. That gives me my reverser gear. It's actually not a bad thing to keep it -1. You'll see sometimes people put a gearbox that gives them, so they can do 3 to 1, both forward and reverse. In reverse, you're going to want to go slower. The boat doesn't handle properly in reverse because you're not pushing with a nice sharp bow. So I like to have that. It lets me go slower in reverse anyway. All right, we're just going to quickly build out the motor, and then we'll break for this video, and we'll start up in the next one. All right, so here's our modular engine clutch. Let's put our crankshafts in. So I like just for fun, I usually like to do, I'm going to do some straight, what are those? Those are 4s. I'll do straight 6s. I like a 6-cylinder straight engine, just, kind of engineering goofiness. They're balanced well. Of course, this doesn't matter in game, but people tell you, it's a flat is more efficient. Sure, it is, but I like having a straight engine. That's one of the things that I just like to do. Let's go back to modular. I want to put a belt on here. Drive belt. All right, let's put on starters. Now sometimes you'll see people, they'll put a pipe to join the engines. I don't like to do that. That's not very realistic. Let's do a pump. We'll do an engine-driven coolant pump. Let's do a alternator. That will produce our power. A boat like this, alternator should be fine to produce our power. All right. Let's quickly finish up just building this motor, and then we'll break. All right, so let's quickly do a cooling loop. Fluid in there. So what we're going to do here is we'll cut a hole there. We'll go to fluid for fluid port, and we will use our J key to rotate. We'll put a pipe. So fluid's going in, fluid's going to go out. We'll turn the pipe this way. We'll do a coolant manifold. And we'll make it really easy here. We'll put another fluid port there. And we'll pipe that. That's a really simple cooling loop. And if we need to, we can add more, but we'll see about that later. All right, next thing we want to do is see where my center of gravity is. So as you see, my center of gravity is right about the middle of the boat. Let's do a quick measurement here. I often like to use a pink block for measurement. That note reminds me to delete it if I forget it. All right, so our boat overall is a length of 13 meters. Our center of gravity is at 6 meters. So as you can see, we're pretty well balanced there. So that's nice. So, we'll talk about ballasting later and moving the weight around if we need to. All right, so let's just quickly finish up this modular engine, and then we'll break. All right, so we need an air manifold. And where do I want to stick that? I can stick that anywhere. I'll just stick it here. I need a fuel manifold. And so the reason I just went and checked that, the center of gravity is where I'm going to put my fuel tanks. All right, so I think I'm just going to do regular standard tanks. I'll do large tanks. I could do custom tanks, but I don't know if I want to do customs or not. So, all right, so there is my my 2 fuel tanks. As you see, I put them right at the center of gravity. Let me actually move them back one. So now as these drain, as fuel drains out of these, the boat's not going to change. It's not going to tip forward or backwards. That's why I did that. All right, and so let's do, I'm actually going to, let me delete these off here. I'm going to change these a little. All right, and then we'll break here in a second. I won't make this video too long. All right, perfect. Let's pipe these, and then we will call it a break, and we'll start up again in the next video. So one thing that helps you build a lot is if you start getting good at the orientation of the blocks using the using your JK and L keys. I can give you some tips on that next video. All right, and then we'll connect up the air next video. All right, so we'll continue this in the next video. Thanks for watching.